From her teens, Krystyna made it quite clear she preferred the company of men to women. By the time she was in Budapest, she'd been married twice. She was able to develop an instant rapport with any man who took her fancy, and became used to collecting stray dogs, young men who worshipped her. But one of the men who flocked around her was a little different, a little older, and more charismatic. Andrew Kowerski was a fierce Polish patriot and former officer in the Polish army who had lost a leg in a hunting accident.
Kennedy was his adopted name. He fell passionately for her in Budapest and was at first rejected.
But slowly she came round. Soon she realized she had met the love of her life.
And one thing led to another. And they became very close and spent most of 42, 43, early 44 together.
Andrew's disability meant he couldn't undertake the journeys to Poland. Instead, he organized an escape route for refugees and prisoners of war. Krystyna joined in, and soon dozens of Polish officers were making their way to the West through their network, including trained pilots who were desperately needed by the Allies.
She made it her job to smuggle people out of Poland. No Secret Service told her to do it. But she knew that the Polish army had been catastrophically defeated, and that a lot of officers had survived, and that the army was being reconstituted elsewhere. So it was manifestly her duty as a good Pole.
So successfully did she do her duty that soon she and Andrew were at the top of the Gestapo wanted list. Budapest was becoming as dangerous as Warsaw. As the war progressed, the Nazi grip on Central Europe tightened, even on countries like Hungary that were meant to be independent. The Gestapo piled on the pressure on the Hungarian authorities to crack down on any dissidents. Krystyna was arrested twice, the last time only escaping deportation to Germany and certain death, by feigning illness and persuading a Hungarian doctor to say she was about to die. The Gestapo vowed to get revenge. Soon, they got their chance. In late 1940, Hungary abandoned its official neutrality and threw its lot in with the Nazis. Now people like Andrew and Krystyna were fair game. It was time to leave. With the help of the British ambassador, they escaped in Andrew's small car, making a perilous journey across southern Europe and the Middle East to the safety of Cairo. This was British territory, but was hardly a war zone. The North Africa front was hundreds of miles away in the desert, and Cairo was a haven for relaxation and pleasure.
When Krystyna arrived in Cairo, she was regarded with some suspicion for various reasons by the Poles and the British, and she was sidelined.
The Poles stuck to what the London Poles told them, that it was impossible that she should have moved all these people out of Poland without some degree of German connivance, and did their best to hold her at arm's length and warned any Secret Service that had thought of employing her that careful with her, she must have links to the Germans.
In war-torn Cairo, few British intelligence officers who had met Krystyna believed any of this. But it was clear that her links with Andrew had made her known to the Germans, and she was deemed too high a risk to go back to Central Europe. She was paid a small pension and ignored.
Being sidelined in Cairo must have been a soul-destroying experience. I mean, she was clearly a girl who lived on adrenaline, was a passionate patriot. To be stuck in Cairo, way out, by now the war had moved well away from Cairo, it must have been an absolutely depressing and soul-destroying experience.
It was. For 2 years, Krystyna was given absolutely nothing to do. Cairo was enjoyable for a while, but soon the glamour couldn't disguise an emptiness Krystyna felt about not being able to do anything for her country. She was saved by something entirely unexpected. In July 1940, as he surveyed the ruins of occupied Europe, the newly appointed Prime Minister of Britain, Winston Churchill, decided a fresh initiative was needed to hit Germany hard where it most hurt, behind its own lines. Britain already had several espionage organizations, but Churchill wanted more. All the raiding, the sabotage, the assassinations, all the dirty tricks of war would now come under a new organization, the Special Operations Executive.
The Special Operations Executive, or SOE, was a clandestine organization set up early on in the Second World War by the British. It's been described that Churchill said its task was to set Europe ablaze. What it did was liaise with resistance forces within occupied Europe, and its aim was to target the morale of German troops.
The idea was to mount guerrilla attacks on vulnerable points like communications and factories and other key installations valuable to the Germans. SOE's task was to coordinate these attacks by supplying ammunition and organizing resistance groups on the ground, some of whom hated each other more than the enemy.
One of the important things that Churchill felt and the cabinet felt was that SOE should not be part of the British intelligence fraternity. It should be a separate organization. So it drew on talent right across the board.
In a secret hideaway in the Scottish Highlands, the teachers, architects, plumbers, and other assorted oddballs who had been recruited by word of mouth, the only qualification needed was fluency in another language, were taught sabotage and espionage. They were issued with a gun and taught how to fire, not according to military principles, but in a style developed by the Shanghai police. Don't bother to aim, just point and fire, and then fire again.
On how many occasions may your life depend on correct dealing with a sentry? He should be stalked from behind, then struck across the Adam's apple and punched in the small of the back. And he's dragged away to where the Japanese stranglehold can be applied. And that's the end of that one.
Finally, they were given the famous cyanide pill, just in case.
They told us almost apologetically about lethal tablets, suicide pills, to be taken only as a last resort.
The first agents were sent into France in 1941. By the end of the war, SOE employed over 13,000 people. 3,000 of them were women, and they weren't just secretaries. Many were involved in planning and strategy. And a small select few were working undercover as spies and secret agents.